Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me today for our Introduction to Fly Fishing series. I'm Will Johnson. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. Let's get going. First of all, congratulations on your interest in the sport of fly fishing. It's certainly been a great passion of mine over the years and for all of us here at the Ashland Fly Shop. When we teach, we really like to take a very simple approach, break it into bite-sized pieces. That's what we're going to do today. It can feel overwhelming, but you can do this. First of all, let's talk a little bit about what makes fly fishing different from conventional fishing. And I really believe that that's presentation. You'll hear that term a bit in the sport. And that is the idea of how the flies are presented to the fish as fish food, whether it's on the surface or underneath the surface of the water, and that natural presentation. So how does one do that? I'm sure most of you are familiar with conventional fishing tackle and methods, where you're casting the weighted lure out into the river, you're then reeling it back in, or you're casting a float that's drifting down the stream. It's effective. Fly fishing, on the other hand, is where you're really more in tune with the presentation of the fly. You're really trying to mimic the natural insect, whether that's above or below the surface of the water. So you're using a very lightweight, plasticized fly line that lands very softly on the surface of the water. And from there, you're actually continue to manipulate the line, again, creating that natural presentation to entice a strike from the fish. The next real defining difference is the fly rod, reel, and fly line. The fly rod is a bit longer. Typically they're in the 9-foot range. The fly reel is more unique. It spins forward and backward and sits in a little different spot on the rod itself, so you can manipulate the line a bit more. And the fly line is quite different from the monofilament that you may have been used to. It's a plasticized floating line. It floats on the surface of the water. So all these pieces are definitely a bit different, so we want to get in and break that down for you. All right, so let's talk about fly rods, the coveted fly rod. I really like to always say that a fly rod is not a magic wand, even though it kind of looks like one out there on the water when you're waving it around. But it's made of the same materials that conventional rods are made from, typically. What you'll find, though, is it's longer. And it's longer because it really needs to act a little more sophisticated as a lever to deliver that fly line and really deliver that fly line accurately and at distance. So we have a 9-foot fly rod here. Most rods that you find are going to be in a 4-piece configuration, which I think is important too. It's much easier to get that fly rod in and out of the car without breaking the tip off. Fly rods come just like that. They typically come with a hard case too, sometimes a rod sock. They don't necessarily come with a fly reel or line unless you buy it in a kit version, which you certainly can. The fly reel attaches to the bottom of the rod. That's also a very obvious difference. The fly reel attaches to the bottom, and the idea there is that the fly reel is back here so that you can actually manipulate the fly line when you're casting and stripping the line or whatever you're doing, manipulating the line. Okay, so you're hooked, you're ready to buy a fly rod. Let's talk a little bit about the lengths, because they are a bit longer than coming from the conventional world. A 9-foot rod is really going to be the standard, especially if you're anywhere west of the Rockies, including the Rockies. That 9-foot length is really, really versatile. You can cover a lot of ground with it. We do see some shorter rods, and those are going to have to do with more cramped style fishing, smaller streams, more brushy streams. We see a lot of 8-foot, 8.5-foot rods on the East Coast, where it's a little more you find a little bit more of that fishing. You can find rods up to 10 feet long that might be suggested for you if you are doing a certain style of fishing, maybe some surf fishing or beach fishing, or anywhere where a little bit longer cast might be involved. But typically your 9-foot rod is going to be the standard for Western United States fishing. Another main characteristic of the rod is what we call the action, and this has to do with the flex pattern of the rod, or how the rod flexes when you cast it forward and backward. You're really in the beginning looking for a moderate to fast action rod. These are the rods that are going to be put in front of you the most. It's probably the most common action for a fly rod, although we do see a fair amount of fast action rods too. But moderate fast is going to be the best for the beginner because it's going to flex enough that you can feel the rod bend in your hand when you're casting. That's really important as you develop your timing. So that moderate fast action is a very, very versatile rod action for a beginner. All right, so let's talk about the weight of the fly rod, which you'll see there's a weight designation to the fly rod that's printed on it, a number 5, a number 6. This doesn't have anything to do with the actual weight of the rod. The easiest way to look at this is the smaller the number, the smaller the rod, the larger the number, the larger the rod. So if you were going after large ocean fish, you'd maybe look at a 10 weight rod. If you were going after very small trout in a little stream out back of the cabin, you'd maybe be looking at a 7-foot 2 weight or something. So, so I think that's the simplest place to start with that. So we'll say, 2 to 4 weight rods, small trout, small stream fishing, 4 to 6 weight rods. That is your standard United States trout fishing. Without getting too specialized, that's a very, very common standard choice. 7 to 8 weight rods if you're learning to fly fish for steelhead or bass, or you live in Florida and you're learning to fly fish for bonefish or inshore fish. That's going to be the size of rod you're looking for, a 7 or an 8 weight. More often than not, 9 out of 10 people that come into the shop, we're selling them in the beginning a 9-foot 5 weight fly rod. That's a very standard rod for fishing trout, ponds, bass, everything, anything and everything. All right, fly reels. Let's talk about fly reels. So obviously quite different from a conventional reel. The line goes out, the reel spins backwards, the line comes in, the reel spins forwards. So a little bit of a complex mechanism, but actually quite simple once you get used to it, and quite effective. It does have a drag knob on the back. Most reels that you find, I would encourage you to get a reel with a drag system so that you can control the tension of how the line comes off the reel. Most reels you're going to find today at all price points are going to be a large arbor reel, and that has to do with this arbor here. It holds the fly line out a little bit further, so when the line sits on the reel, it doesn't get too coiled up. So if you were to ask, for some ideas of reels in the shop, you would be looking for a large arbor reel. You would tell them the size of the rod that you have, and you would be shown the appropriate size range of reels that would fit on that rod. The simplest way to choose a reel is to just roll into the shop, tell them you've got a 9-foot 5 weight rod, or whatever the weight designation of your rod is, and they're going to put out a few reels on the counter that are going to be compatible with that size rod. A note about that, reels have really come a long way in the last 5 or 10 years. There's some really great choices available to you in that introductory price range. Just, put them in your hand, make sure you've got one that feels tight, feels solid. You run the drag up and back, and it just, it adds drag. It doesn't feel like it's gonna, give on you at all. And that's all you really need to do when you're choosing your reel. All right, lastly, we're going to talk about your fly line system. That consists of backing, fly line, leader, tippet to fly. Simple. All right, let's make it simple. All right, so the first thing that's attached to the spool or the reel is the backing. This is tied to the reel. You're typically going to have 50 to 100 yards of backing on any reel unless you're after a much bigger fish. It's kind of a placeholder, but it's also there so that your fly line isn't 300 feet long and costs you $300. So it's basically about 20-pound break strength, and it just kind of fills up the reel. It's very, very thin. And again, you're not going to see much of it until it goes whipping out the front of the rod with the first big fish that you catch. When you purchase a reel, most shops are going to have large spools of backing. They're going to roll it on the appropriate amount for you before they install the fly line. Next, the fly line, which is just a critical, very unique piece of this whole system. But the fly line attaches to the backing via a loop system, typically, so that you can change your fly lines easily. Again, the shops will do this for you. But your fly line is typically 80 to 100 feet long. Again, it's a plasticized material, so it's very smooth in your fingers, floats on the surface of the water, and is rated to your fly rod. So there's a lot to kind of unpack there, but simply if you have a 5-weight rod, you're looking for that 5/6 reel, and you're looking for a 5-weight line. And that's your system, all fits together that way. So as a beginner, keep in mind you're looking for that weight forward floating fly line with a versatile taper. There's lots of different tapers in fly lines. Some are much simpler for casting, just dry flies, and some are way aggressive for casting larger streamers and things, but you want a simple, versatile taper. So the next piece in the system is your leader. This is going to be fairly familiar to you because it's made from clear monofilament, which we certainly take from the conventional fishing world. This is unique as well. This will loop. There should be a loop in the front of your fly line, a small, thin, welded loop, and there's a loop in the back of your leader. These will fit together in kind of a figure-8 connection. It makes it very simple for changing leaders, so I strongly encourage you to look for that loop-to-loop system when this is being put together for you. Your leader is tapered, your fly line is tapered, and the idea there is that when you push that energy through the fly line, it unfurls the leader at the end. So the leader is thick where it connects to the fly line, thin where you connect it to the fly, so that fly kicks over for you. More on that later, but that's how it attaches. As a beginner, you're looking for a 7.5 to 9 foot length leader. These are going to be the most versatile for you. I would also really encourage you to get them in packs of 3. That way, if you get a big tangle because you mucked up a couple casts or something, they're easy to change with that loop-to-loop connection. So get them in packs of 3 so you can kind of roll through them a bit and just kind of keep fishing. Getting into leaders and tippet, you do get into the X system a little bit, which is kind of an archaic system we've brought down from, from the traditions of fly fishing. Honestly, I'm going to tell you to just leave that aside for now, because all leaders and tippet also state on the packaging the break strength, and that's what you want to go with in the beginning. Look for that break strength, get some feedback from the folks at the fly shop about the correct break strength for the fishing that you're doing. All right, we're almost there. We're sliding into home. We're talking about tippet. Tippet is the material that basically you tie your fly onto. It's the very last piece in your terminal tackle. You tie your fly onto it and you wing it out there and off you go. Tippet is a part of every leader that you buy, and this is important to know. We get a lot of questions in the store like, oh, I'm just going to tie tippet onto the leader and go fishing, right? Not necessarily. Your leader has an integrated piece of about 2.5 to 3 feet of tippet included in the leader. So why would you purchase a spool of tippet? Well, because as you lose flies, you lose a fly on a fish, you lose a fly on a tree, you lose a fly here, you're breaking that tippet end back into the leader. Now you can sit down on the riverbank, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and tie a piece of 2.5, 3 feet of tippet back onto the leader. Boom, you're back out there, you're ready to go. Lastly, on the tippet, you want to spool a tippet that's the same size of the leaders that you're using to replace, and then you probably want to spool a tippet that's a line size smaller. So if you feel like you need to step down or use something a little bit lighter, so you would have let's say you have a 5-pound leader, you'd want a spool of 5-pound tippet and maybe a spool of 3-pound tippet. And that would cover you well for what you're fishing for. You don't want to go up, so you don't necessarily want to add an 8-pound tippet to a 5-pound leader. You're kind of getting a little bit wonky there. So, so that is tippet and how it fits in with your system. All right, so to recap, as a beginner, you walk into the shop. If you're like 95% of our customers, you're looking for a trout fishing rod or a bass pond fly fishing rod or something like that. You know, that's gonna be your 9-foot 5-weight fly rod, simple, mechanically sound, large arbor reel that matches that rod, weight forward 5-weight fly line, 3-pack of 4X 6-pound leaders and a 5X tippet, and boom, you're off and running. Next up, we're going to be talking about flies. Look forward to it and see you then.